And we're on. Cool. So, I'm here with Eric again.
That's me.
Yeah. And this time I got to drive the 10 hours and come visit him. And so far it's been a pretty eventful visit. We showed up Friday, I guess yesterday, first thing in the morning, about 6 o'clock. And on the way up, we noticed that there were some strong storms. And turns out that they're now getting a record flood in the past 5-8 years, something like that.
Quite a bit of flooding now. Lots of water, not crawl space. House is completely surrounded.
Yep.
Went from Columbus, Nebraska to Venice pretty fast.
Oh man. Yeah, actually it was 5 hours?
Yeah.
So we were walking in puddles in the driveway, and then about 5 hours later we were walking in bigger puddles about waist high.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I got to drive up in the middle of the night, and I got to do some pretty deep thinking on my own on the way up here. And I don't want to get too sensitive right away, but
might as well dive
right in. So Eric, he shared with me some of his own personal writings, and it kind of struck a chord with me as well, because we've both gone through what seems to be the same, different pathways, obviously different lives, but it seems to be the same resonant topic of meaning crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And normally hits young men, I think, at different stages of their life, but like late 20s to early 30s is normally about that time frame where you're starting to hit that first meaning crisis of your life, I think. As far as our father's generations go, I don't think they really had a lot of help in that moment, and that's kind of that midlife crisis moment where you don't have a lot of information to tell you which direction to go, but yet somehow you're supposed to be a man and know it all at the same time.
And there's something that happens, I think, at 30 years old too. There's a certain awakening that happens with every man at that age. From what I understand, in the Jewish community, you have a bar mitzvah at 13, but traditionally you weren't considered a man until the age of 30. Whether you were married with children, it didn't really matter. And I mean, not man of your house, but I mean man in the community, because they didn't want young men making foolish decisions all over the place and affecting people's lives.
Oh, you mean
it's
today?
One thing to run a family, but you don't let a 25-year-old run a massive corporation, because 99 out of every 100 of those men doesn't have the capacity to do it.
Yeah.
There are one-offs.
And it's also, I think there's a lot of, it depends on what kind of struggle you expect out of it, or it depends on the performance you expect out of a man too, because our founding fathers were 20s, early 20s. Mm-hmm. So it's that generational thing too. As it seems like as we get older with our generations and we expect less of our men growing up at a young age.
True.
That meaning crisis becomes more and more prominent earlier.
Another instance is if you look at our founding fathers and their spit and vinegar during the Revolutionary War, and how temperate they became, say after George Washington served as president. They got into a new century. They were faced with all kinds of things, the War of 1812 and whatnot. And you see them becoming a lot more diplomatic, but not weak.
Oh yeah.
And the season of life they would have been in is that early 30s to early 40s stage at that point. Mm-hmm. And when you look at it that way, you even see it in the founding fathers, how it was, give me liberty or give me death, right? And the ones who obviously survived, not Patrick Henry, but the ones who made it through the war, they went on to politics. They became much more temperate there towards the turn of the century. And of course, they would have been getting on to 45 and 50 years old, some of them. Mm-hmm. And a man will become much more temperate as he ages, so far as, I don't want to say that, commensurate to the effort he puts in to become a better man. So if a guy puts in no effort ever, he never improves.
Yeah.
Right. He might become more temperate, but really it's likely going to translate more into laziness rather than becoming better but more temperate. Someone who's easier to deal with, doesn't fly off the handle as young men usually do. And I know I saw that myself around the age of 30, it was a complete revolution in my mind. It was like I was seeing the world for the first time, right? Though everything was familiar, nothing looked the same.
Yeah.
And things started to make sense that had never made sense before. And I can only attribute that to, and I had a good friend who was considerably older than me at the time. And he said, that's pretty much what I've been waiting for and he's 20 years older than I am. And he said, yeah, that's what I've been waiting for. He's like, and now you'll see it in other men when they come of age, about 30 years old. And you'll see them all of a sudden, they're more logical, they're more temperate, they're more patient, and their intelligence seems to increase significantly.
And it wasn't until, 29, 30, Jesus started his ministry.
30 years old.
Yeah, 30 years old.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right on track.
It is.
Start making sense.
It is.
Yeah.
The meaning crisis, I feel like, that you're talking about, I struggled with this for 20 years. So from my late teens to my late 30s, I struggled with it. And I feel like only recently have I finally made not only the decision that no matter what comes my way, I'm not going to let it get me depressed and I'm not going to let it beat me down. But deciding who I am and who I want to be and worrying more about going after that, the identity crisis seems to fade.
Mm-hmm.
The identity crisis is only a different facet of anxiety, I think. And anxiety cannot bear action.
Yeah, because you have nothing to be anxious about if you're acting.
Right.
If you're in the action.
And action will always, and I say this to people, I say it this way, is action overrides anxiety. And it always does. Well, a meaning crisis is one of those things that if you're busy enough, and not just busy with stupid stuff, but busy pursuing the man you want to become, like you said, you don't have any time for anxiety. You don't have any time for this meaning crisis. Who am I?
Well, in that moment, when you're acting, I'm going to make that point too while we're on it. Jordan Peterson talks about life as a map, and he wrote the book Maps of Meaning specifically for that metaphor. So when you're handed life, basically a map that you don't know how to read, and you can add different overlays to it. So your worldviews to it, you can have your overlays, your lenses that you look through. But eventually you have to settle on one or a few, or however it works out for you. But you have to find that path through your life, so to speak, in order to before it starts to make sense. And that is your meaning. Like your path, your life path is your meaning. So your action upon taking the course of action in order to follow that path, whether you got to hack your way out through the brush, or you got to follow someone else's for a while and so you can get on your feet. That's exactly like how he explains it. You have to find that life path, and once you start taking actions and taking steps towards that goal, where your azimuth, and your reckoning.
Mm-hmm.
So just head that direction and figure out your path along the way. And when you start doing that, you'll find your meaning.
I agree. And I think something else about finding your path, or however you want to say it in life, you can't just think about your destination all the time. If you always think about your destiny, you should always have a destination in the back of your mind, no matter what you're doing. But I think that we can I don't want to get too far off of a meaning crisis, but I feel like being anxious of who we are today is exactly what that is, right?
As a society?
No, as people.
As people.
Yeah. So if we start focusing on our goal too much, there's a personally, although I'm no philosopher, but personally, I think the phrase or the quote, the journey is the goal.
No.
I think it's a bit misguided, but we can find a certain wisdom in that, is if we always think about our goals as in it's something I'm going to get to someday, and that's our focus.
The journey is the goal.
I would say that we have to modify that statement because it's a little bit incomplete. It's actually quite incomplete.
Very incomplete.
If we were to say the enjoyment of the journey is a goal, I think that's a much better way to say it.
Yeah.
The enjoyment of the journey from here to there, from today to tomorrow, the enjoyment is a goal, because the more we're enjoying our way there, the more we're going to enjoy it when we get there.
Philosophical question of what is more important, the journey or the destination? Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say that I wouldn't spend any time even thinking of that question, simply because I'd be missing out on two other great things, which is to enjoy the journey and enjoy the goal when I get there.
Yeah. Well, the smart ass says it's the people you meet along the way, but
I like that though. I guess I got a little smart ass. But that's something, that I spent a lot of time thinking about where I wanted to be. And one, I made the huge mistake of not actually just doing all the scary things I had to do to get there. And so I remained stagnant for a long time, which is an excellent way to get into a meaning crisis in the first place, is to be completely stagnant.
Yeah.
And if I had paid attention more to how much I was enjoying every day, I wouldn't have missed out on so many things that I could have enjoyed and possibly been much further along if I was thinking about how much I was enjoying the moment right now, but with a focus on the future. So it's really, if you're not responsible about it, if a person's not responsible about it, you become one of two people. It seems to me that you're either the person who's always thinking about tomorrow and you forget to enjoy anything you have today, and you can become ungrateful at that point. I think it's real easy to slip into that trap where you're ungrateful for what you have today because all you can think about is tomorrow. Say you have big houses and Ferraris on your mind all the time, but you're living in even squalor. Let's just say you're living in the lowest quality housing you can think of, driving a hoopty car. You forget to be appreciative of the fact that at least when it rains, it doesn't rain on you, and that you don't have to hoof it from point A to point B.
Yeah.
I've been there. Mm-hmm. I was there for a long time, right? And there's days that I would remember to be grateful for what little I did have. And then there was a long period of time in between those days of being grateful that it seemed like I wasn't grateful for any of it. And I think that's how we modify that quote. I liked the quote as soon as I read it, though I realized how incomplete it was, that the journey is the goal. That focuses on today, which is the second type of person. The first one is the one who's always looking towards tomorrow. But the second one is the one who's always looking at today. All they think about is living in the moment. They end up a wanderer in midlife, having no success, no money, few friends, because all they thought about was today. And what is just thinking about the moment you're living in get you, right? You're not making those responsible decisions, but also a very deep, as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I can understand, a very deep psychological principle seems to be taking hold of people who do that. And I've met a lot of these people in my industry, and you end up just seeing everybody else as a tool to use, as opposed to another person to become friends with or to become associates with.
Yeah, it's a Machiavellian narcissism. It's where you're just saying the right words. You're being nice, and you're saying the right words, but you really don't care about the person at all on a personal level.
That's exactly right.
There's nothing personal.
Right.
Even good or bad, just nothing personal.
Yeah, exactly. And I've worked with some, and I've met quite a few. And to be honest, in my industry, it's the construction industry. And when a guy's only thinking about today, and I meet those guys when they're young, and they work until they have beer money or money for whatever other illicit thing they're doing, and then they go and do it, and then they go back to work. Well, they keep that up for 10 years, and they've been in jail a couple of times, and they end up with no friends, no money, and no future at that point, right? Unless they change. And then maybe they do change a little bit to the point where they're not just on a bender every time they get a paycheck, but then they wind up still just thinking about today and how much money can I get today. And I've seen them end up using people pretty bad and being very crooked. Usually I don't meet these guys face to face. It's a customer who says, yeah, this guy came in and we paid him, and he came in and did a few things and we paid him again. And then all of a sudden he's gone. Like, yeah, because he was on drugs. Like, that's what happens.
Yeah.
And I think that if a person's only thinking about today, there are very few good destinations for that person. There can be immense wealth, fame, and respect for the guy who only thinks about tomorrow. But he's likely in my opinion, again, he's likely to be empty inside because he's forgetting to be grateful for anything he has, and he ends up trampling everything he has. And if you're not grateful for your hoopty car or for your squalid house, you know, it doesn't have to be dirty, but it could just be run down. Like, okay, fine, but that's today.
Yeah.
We'll work ourselves out of it, but it's today. And what that ends up doing is it seems it seeps out from just being ungrateful about my material possessions. Eventually you're not grateful for the people in your life.
Yeah. And the ungratefulness, and thanks for calling me out on all of it, but the ungratefulness, I've caught myself in that pattern of life as well, where it's not even that you're treating your family, or at least in my case, I didn't feel like it. I did, at least. I didn't feel like I was treating my family horribly by any means. It's just that you become so detached from the situation because that ungratefulness is set so deep. You become detached. You kind of get in this very depressive rut, and you're unemotionally available for anyone in your family. Because, I mean, for one, you're ungrateful at the root of it all. So you're not even grateful for your family. You're not grateful for the job that you get or the food that you're working for. You know, like, you're ungrateful to yourself. At the root of the issue is that you are even ungrateful to yourself.
Yeah.
So you can't even treat yourself with respect. And I think sometimes when you find yourself in that moment and you finally give yourself permission to have a good day once in a while,
yeah,
and you have a good day and you're grateful for that day and you want it to be the same day again tomorrow, if you can, you start putting together your gratefulness. It's like, oh, well, I'm thankful that I had a good day today. Hey, I'm grateful that my wife meets me at the door. I'm grateful that I have kids that get to go to school, and I'm grateful that I have a job that I can provide for my family.
Yeah.
And it's just those little bitty things. The next thing you know, it's like, oh, well, I'm talking to my wife a little bit more. Oh, we're putting together a plan for life. We are actually coming up with a common idea that we can agree on and move forward with. Oh, now I have meaning because I want to prove that I can do this for my family, to my family, and to myself. So now you start putting together a little bit of a pathway. You start cutting away at the edge of the woods, so to speak, and it opens up.
Yep.
You know, the opportunities open up. I'm at that point now, finally, with my wife after. We've been together for 16 years this year now.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a long 6.
She'll appreciate watching that. That's for you, Emily.
That's for you, honey. No, she'll agree. It's been a long 16 years to finally get to the point where we're finally just like settled in and happy, and we're cruising. We're finally at cruising altitude, it seems like.
Yeah.
And it's been a long, hard road to get there.
Absolutely. You know, every time I would finish up a project, I would despise it. I'd take some pictures. Most of the time I wouldn't even take pictures, which is why I didn't advertise very well on social media and other things. Is nearly every single project I ever finished I despised it by the time I was done. Couldn't look at it, couldn't think about it, hated it. I'd get paid, and I even resented the money that went in the account.
Because you are always your worst critic.
I am definitely my own worst critic. But what was happening was, and I actually realized this, although I didn't call it the identity crisis. I didn't call it a meaning crisis. It's not wrong to call it a meaning crisis. I'm just saying that I had my own word for it before you and I started talking.
Yep.
Is that it was because I was the guy who was always looking to tomorrow. When tomorrow comes, if that's all you've ever looked forward to is someday. Well, what ends up transpiring is it's not as awesome as it will be in your mind. When you really live it out, it's not quite as awesome.
No. Have lower standards.
Enjoy today. If I'd enjoyed the process and just said, you know, say everything goes wrong, right? Let's say the whole project is nothing but basically a country song in the form of a construction project. You know, your woman leaves, your dog runs away, and your truck breaks down. You know, and it's okay. So you've had the worst project you can think of. If you can bring yourself to the point where you can enjoy today and keep tomorrow's goals in focus, you're ready for what I would consider a deeper step, is to watch all of the ridiculous things that happen in life. Because realistically, like a life is nothing more than a sitcom. Like there are a lot of days where I feel like I'm in a sitcom that just is maybe funny to everyone but me. And I think a lot of people think that, right? And if you can get to the point where you can enjoy today and keep your goals in mind, then you can step up to something much higher, which is to look at all the crap that happens today and find it a little bit funny. Because if you can get to that point, you've really started to enjoy life.
Yeah. Well, and you said something that I've pointed out in conversation with Emily too. It's like I feel like I finally got to the point where I can just enjoy the process of existing. You know, like it's just, and it is a process. It's work. It's work to just exist. Even
it is. It absolutely is.
It's finally to that point where it feels like I'm enjoying the process of just every day. We're just going to build a little bit more, a little bit more, and like as everyone else probably doesn't know, but you know, we have started a farm, and we have bees, and we have sheep, and chickens, and all sorts of stuff. And it's really cool just to kind of, at first, when you have that first goal of like, hey, let's start homesteading, let's do a production farm, and you start seeing all the goals ahead of you. And it's like, oh yeah, let's hit this milestone and this milestone, and you're always trying to hit milestone number 3, and you haven't even hit milestone 1. Which is, let's just get the barn cleaned up.
Yeah.
You know, but you're building fence, and you're getting ready for all your animals, and you're getting, you know, your beehives and stuff set up, and you haven't even got your first animal. You haven't even mowed your grass properly.
Right.
So, but it's just, so it's taking those steps back and being like, okay, obviously we jumped the gun. We're not doing this properly. And all it's doing is causing anxiety, because we're so far ahead of the game that we're not really in the game. We want to play, and we're not there yet. And so that causes that little bit of anxiety. And when you're not hitting milestone 3 before 1, you start getting a little depressed. And it's like, oh man, beat down a little bit. Like, oh, I'm just not doing it right. And it doesn't even look right. It's like, no, because you haven't built a foundation.
Right.
You haven't started with your foundation.
Right.
So you can't put up a house, and you can't start building walls without a foundation. So it's taking those steps back, and sometimes it takes a good woman to slap you in the face a little bit. And you're like, okay, slow down. Let's take a step back.
Yeah.
Let's do this step by step, and let's break it down and scale it a little bit at a time.
You were suffering the effects of always looking to tomorrow.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why I said you were calling me out. 100% calling me out.
Yeah.
And it is that looking for tomorrow, and you're always trying to meet that next goal before tomorrow comes. And that's a trap. That is a rut and a trap that many people get into.
They used to tell us in the Corps, that when you're on a rifle range, you never count your shots while you shoot.
No.
Right? You just keep shooting. The only shot that counts is the last one. You got to know what your hold is for the next one. And you're going to get there. You've only got 50 rounds. We've only got so many years. Keep shooting until the rounds are out. But don't think about the final score. Just set goals. Every time I want to hit center mass. Yep. I want to shoot a perfect range.
You're aiming until you see click. Hear click.
Right.
That's it.
And when you're shooting, you are thinking you want to qualify expert. Of course, you should want to be an expert at everything you do, right? With the realistic idea that we probably won't become an expert in everything we do. But you want to have the final goal in focus, where I want to shoot a perfect range, which means this shot needs to be right. This shot's based on the last one. That's just metaphor for learning from our mistakes in life. Or if we did something right, repeat that. I can't tell you how many times I did something right and then did the opposite thing the next time. I had a good recipe, then I ignored it. I pulled out a book the other day. It's three ring binder, and it's got a 14-step SOP for how to complete a construction job from beginning to end that I wrote years ago.
Oh, no kidding.
And I spent all those years ignoring it and then making the same mistakes over and over again. Because I'd written it out one day when I was like, you know what, I wrote it at the end of the most successful year I ever had in business. And I wrote this out, and if I'd have followed that to a T on every job would have gone at least right enough that I would have continued to make good money and do really well in the industry. And I totally ignored it. I had the right It's you see you hit center mass and you decide to hold somewhere else when you shoot at the target. Why would you do that? Right?
Especially when you're the one that did it.
When you're the one that did it.
Yeah.
It's not like I found this book and I just found it too late. I wrote the book.
That's even
that
worse.
is pretty funny.
I wrote the
This
book
is
and I failed.
stupid. Like, you wrote the book, man. Come on now. You're going to ignore what you... It's one thing to find a book and you're like, man, and then you go out and make a couple mistakes. And you're like, oh, this book actually was right. But when you write it and then you're the one who F's it up, you're like, oh.
You ignore it.
Yeah. And I haven't really told anybody that. And then I just kind of decided to share it with you.
That's great.
But it is, I quite literally wrote the book for my own success in the construction industry and then ignored it. I spent the next few years ignoring it and then wondering why I was having money trouble.
You should write another book called Writing the Book for Your Own Success.
We'll publish this after I've got that copyrighted.
Challenge.
That's a good one. That's good.
How to fail at writing the book for your own success. No.
So is the what you call, and aptly so I'd say, the meaning crisis.
I call, well, as you said, an identity crisis, a meaning crisis. I think they line up exactly the same, honestly, because if you don't have meaning, you don't know your own identity. So, I mean, it is the same metaphor of life, I think.
I think it is too. But here's my question about it. Is the meaning crisis simply a self-respect crisis? And here's why I ask.
Okay.
Is through conversation we've talked about not being grateful for the things we have today. And then eventually that that kind of transitions into something like not being grateful for the work that we've done with our own hands. To look at something and, because I've had projects like that. They look good.
Yeah. So
I even got compliments on them, but I hated them.
But this also could be, are you dissatisfied? Are you dissatisfied because you disrespect yourself? Are you dissatisfied because you could have done better and you know it? Did you pour it all in and you're still dissatisfied because you're disrespecting yourself, because you're like, you're not worth shit. As a person, you are calling yourself, worthless.
I don't think it's different.
Or
I think it might be different levels of severity.
It could be, but
because if you don't do as well as you know you could have,
well, I mean, it could be.
You could still have enough.
Are you rushed?
Respect for yourself, enough grace for yourself to say, you know what? Okay, I'll be happy with this because it's done now.
Yeah.
But learn your lesson and do better next time because you know you can. That's a respectful way to answer that to you.
Yeah, and being self-employed, being your own employer, that's a different story too, because you kind of create your own schedule if need be. As someone that doesn't get to create their own schedule, let's say, and you're put on a job and you do the best you can in the moment that you're given, and maybe it's not your best, but it's like, I've got 48 hours to complete this. This is all the time I got. I'll be here today and tomorrow. That's it.
Right.
I got to rush through it. So if you're giving all that you can in 48 hours and you know it's not your best, if you would have spent 50, so to speak,
but you didn't have it available.
You didn't have 50 hours.
Right.
So now can you spit on it and be like, is that a disrespect to yourself, or is that just a disrespect for the scenario?
That's a lack of self-respect.
Huh.
I think it's a lack of self-respect. All those projects that I despised when I was done was all a lack of self-respect. It was the inability to give myself any kind of grace.
I reach over and get my beer.
The people that, you think about how you treat other people, and if you never give them any grace at all, right? If you never give anybody else any grace, it means you don't respect anybody else enough. Understanding is a type of respect. We think, click your heels and salute, right? Being military men, but that's not all it is. That's not all it looks like, right? That's a I want to say a dramatized version of respect. But respect is somebody, little kids coming to the breakfast table with their glass of milk, they spill it all over the place. Well, you can jump up, scream and holler, sure. And lots of parents do because they're in the moment and they're stressed out. And I don't really think less of them for that, because that's probably a heck of a moment. Like you're trying to get to work and then this kid just backs you up 10 minutes with this stupid milk, But at the end of the day, respect for the child is hey, I told you to be careful, but that's not lighting them up, right? That's just saying, hey, I told you to be careful, and then you're not.
Yeah.
Well, now you don't get to carry the next class to the table. I'm going to do that for you. And then you get to prove yourself the next time. So think about that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a respectful way. Now, of course, we're sitting here chilling, right? Having a good time. So obviously it'd be super easy to respond that way in this moment. It's not Tuesday morning in the beginning of a week that's going to be hectic and take everything you possibly have just to get through it.
Yeah.
That's a way different moment. So I'm not criticizing parents for acting that way.
Well,
what I'm saying is,
as a father,
if we draw from that analogy in our own lives, and let's say I build a deck and I spilled the milk.
Yeah.
Then I say, oh, and there's details, but I'll pick out the little details and then criticize myself for them, on the way home. And it's like, no, hold on. Enjoy the fact that the deck is built and the customer loves it.
Yep.
It's good quality. It's going to last them as long as the house that they're living in. In some cases, the deck is going to last longer than the houses I bolted them to. And it's like, okay, hold on. Back up. Enjoy the fact that we got the job done today. Enjoy those days, I get a check, I cruise to the bank, I deposit the check, and I go on a cruise home. I drive around. I like to drive back roads. I like to just cruise and think. And I'll roll the window down, and I'll just drive. And the best days, of course, are when it's a nice day and it's sunny. And you just, the sun on your skin and the breeze over my scalp. I'd love to say it's through my hair. But those days are the days that I try to put myself right in that moment and remember, this is an awesome moment. Mm-hmm. Remember this moment. But I don't become some wanderer who does nothing but cruise and work jobs just so I can live this,
the cruise life.
The cruise life, yeah. I'm not a free bird all of a sudden, right? I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to go home after this and take care of the business that has to be taken care of after business is done. As crazy as that sounds, if you've been self-employed, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's like, no, I'm going to take these moments and I'm going to enjoy today because I met a goal to get this done. And the days and the projects where I remember to do that, self-respect isn't an issue. But if I take that criticism that I constantly put on myself, now these could be projects that people compliment. These could be projects that I should be proud of. But if I don't remember to enjoy the journey, then when I finish it, it's not, you don't get to rip a sheet off of it and ta-da, it all of a sudden just gets done. The last screw gets put into one of the railings and, well, that's it. And the first time you finish a project, you have this whole, if you have delusions of grandeur like I do, you finish a project and you think there's going to be that moment. The chef gets to pick the silver, the silver dome off of the plate, and then everybody's, no, not how it is. Oh, you're done? You want to check?
You mean it's not like HGTV?
It isn't.
No, okay.
No. So stop watching that. Please. Your contractor wants you to quit watching HGTV.
You mean there's not a montage of your completed project?
There is not. And I'm not sure that I'd look good in a montage. As I do a lot of yelling and throwing tools sometimes, and I think that would look a little weird in a montage. It'd be a South Park montage maybe, but it wouldn't be a good serious montage at all. But I think that when we remember to enjoy the day and keep goals in focus, I think I'm not sure that the cause of that is not going to be self-respect. Maybe that's spitballing. I
think, yeah. As you're accumulating those moments of completed projects, and you can look back on your portfolio of completed projects. So, I have done something. And I think there's also something to be said about, and I noticed this when I was working with the construction crew with the Amish guys. You start doing so much work around your local area, and then next thing you know, you're driving by a year later and say, I put a roof on that house.
Yep.
I put that deck on. I did that siding job.
Yeah.
And it still looks good.
And that's a super cool moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is. But then there's those projects I drive by now, and I'm like, I remember I got really mad at myself. Remember I broke an expensive tool on that job.
Oh.
And then you learn from those things.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you need to check your temper, first of all. That's any man ever, regardless if he has a self-respect problem or not. But, well, okay, yeah, you need to check your temper. But why were you losing your temper in the first place? You were only losing your temper in the first place because you were forgetting to enjoy the moment for its ups and its downs, for better or worse. Right? Enjoy the moment for better or worse. If it's the worst moment of your life, pay attention. Pay attention to the fact that it's the worst moment of your life, because that means every other moment will be better than this one.
That is the practice of stoicism a little bit.
Yeah, embrace the suck. They didn't teach it. They didn't teach us to it in necessarily a how do I want to put that? Well, they didn't use fancy words. I'll put it that way.
Fancy words,
right? It wasn't exactly eloquent coming from the Marine Corps,
articulated in such a way.
but when you say things like "embrace the suck," you really are learning stoicism, right? And as a civilian now, I take that very lesson. Is when I'm on a job and it's not going my way or it's not going as fast as I want, I try to remember, like, look, this is gonna get done. You keep your hands moving, the job gets done. That's all you have to remember. You keep your hands moving, the project gets done. If I remember that and I talk myself down and I tell myself it'll get done and we're gonna do it the right way like we do, and then you move on and you're able to enjoy everything else. And then since you've enjoyed the journey, if the end is not as grand as you were hoping, it's not a huge deal because you've enjoyed the journey. It wasn't hating today because tomorrow will be good. Well, when tomorrow comes, it has its own set of problems. So tomorrow's not better than yesterday. Oh, I wish I'd enjoyed yesterday. But that I suspect anyway, is a self-respect problem.
Yeah.
Is respecting ourselves enough to not criticize ourselves to the point where we hate this moment. And by realizing that if we respect ourselves, if we just learn to pretend like we respect ourselves, we won't feel like we do when we first start out. But we have to pretend like we respect ourselves. You pretend like you love yourself. That's all we can do. Then eventually you'll find that you actually love and respect yourself. That's how Jesus said, forgive your enemies. And that is probably one of the hardest messages to swallow of any that anyone has ever given anyone else.
Well, especially if you take the time to really think about who your really enemy is.
Right.
Yeah.
And he did not say, if we take note, you're going to feel like forgiving your enemies before you can do it. You're not going to feel like you love yourself before you start to treat yourself like you do if you're a person who's never treated yourself like you love yourself. Mm-hmm. If you're a person who's never treated yourself that way, it isn't going to feel natural. It's going to feel dumb. Self-love, self-respect, and self-worth, that's dumb. It's not. The critic's going to tell you all the time in your mind. He's going to tell you, this is stupid. This is stupid. You're not even worth this, right? Which is exactly where we have to start, is because the critic stays in our mind and says those things.
Absolutely.
But when we start to pretend like we respect ourselves.
What is it you said? The critic only exists because people striving? Because you are striving?
Yes. The critic only exists because someone is striving.
So if you're your own critic,
the critic can only exist because I'm doing something.
Yeah.
And I should learn to respect myself enough to take pride in what I'm doing and ignore the critic. Or don't ignore the critic.
No, the critic's
He's going to talk.
The critic is your friend if you know how to use them properly.
You bet.
Yeah.
You bet. I don't block and delete my trolls on social media, specifically because
this is why I haven't blocked you.
It keeps them. That's probably true. He laughs, but that's not. But the reason I don't block them is I know I'm always going to have a dissenting voice, and it causes me to check my message to make sure that I'm speaking only on those things that I know about, and I'm not just shooting off at the mouth. Well, that's what a self critic can do if we don't let them run rampant. Once we start pretending like we love ourselves, we start pretending like we respect ourselves, if we don't feel that way, then eventually what happens is we subdue him because we really do start to grow some self-love and self-respect. Now we've subdued the critic. No, I really am worth that. And I really can do that. But I'll remember that there are other people out there saying I can't, and I'm going to put my best foot forward now.
All right,
because I'm reminded of the negative message constantly.
Let's tie that back. How does that help you in your life find meaning? Okay, so you respect yourself, love yourself. How does that help you find meaning?
I don't think it does de facto. I don't think you're all of a sudden going to find your life's calling simply because you've learned to love yourself. What it is you're going to think clearer about everything, and you're going to be.
That's where you start learning the process.
Right. You're going to be unfettered when you start making decisions where when you hated yourself, you didn't treat yourself with any respect, you were never going to make it. I mean, you weren't just not going to make a decision. that was good for you, you were going to make all the decisions that were bad for you because the critic was telling you that you're not worth it and you're too stupid for that anyway. Why are you even going to try? Now you're going to start trying those things that you never had the courage to do before. And once you start trying those things, you're going to end up experiencing more in life. And in one of those avenues, you're going to find it. But I don't think it just de facto means you're all of a sudden going to find your life's calling because you love yourself.
No, I'm saying like
your life's calling and meaning is going to be a byproduct of the fact that you started doing that in the first place.
Step, let's say like the whole meaning crisis topic that we're doing here. So the first step, when you're finally like, you're in that, through the conversations we've had in the past couple of days, you have good or bad, right? You have good or evil. And our argument here the past couple of days, the past 12 hours at least, probably 16 now, it's been good first. Whereas I say you're stagnant first. I think at some point when you are looking for meaning, you have to stay stagnant for a minute. You have to be like, if you're doing negative, you have to be 0 before you can go positive. 0 is stagnant. If you're constantly doing negative action, you're always setting yourself back. There's got to be a point where you have to go back to 0 and be stagnant so you can start making a positive change.
I agree.
What does it look like? And this is the question. This is what I was setting up the metaphor.
Oh.
So what does it look like for a guy to go from negative to 0? And then just take that first positive step. What's that look like in someone's life? That first positive step. Well, what did you do for your first positive step? That like really like, okay, this is what I have to do to really start making a positive change. And I think I know, because I think I kind of know what you did, but I want to see what you say.
So I agree that there's a moment of neutrality. It also comes and goes in the blink of an eye. Mm-hmm. It's an immeasurably short amount of time.
But it is that second where you got to like notice. Yeah. I think the people that really catch it, like they notice like, okay, I can make a difference. Mm-hmm. Right now, I'm in a neutral state where I've noticed that I need to be more grateful. Even though I may not be grateful yet, I'm not dogging myself so much right now. You know, you're kind of like, you're in that moment of like catching yourself.
And you've already shifted gears.
You're right there like catching yourself.
But you've already shifted into drive at that point. Mm. You're no longer in reverse.
I think that's that stagnant, like, you have it. I'm saying like, I think you still have enough negative baggage, but you're starting to pull enough positive baggage where you're like, you're kind of like you're sitting in that stagnant moment of like your locomotion starting to pick up engine, starting to pick up motivation. And you're just slowly, okay. And until you get to the point of positive traction.
And I don't think I think the moment of neutrality or stagnation, whatever we say, no matter how fast you shift gears, no matter how fast the race car driver shifts gears, there's a moment he's in neutral. Right.
Exactly.
But it's only a moment.
It doesn't stop your momentum necessarily.
At all. Now, however, if we're making rearward momentum, criticizing ourselves, not enjoying anything, the moment you decide that that's all over and we're doing something else, you're not stagnant anymore. You've immediately started forward. So
I think for me, at least, it took a moment of like, it took months where I was catching myself. I was like, that was a bad habit that you just know that I just caught myself in. That's a bad habit.
That's all progress.
That's progress. That is progress, noticing it. But it's that noticing it and still catching myself later doing it again. That's a stagnation. You are catching yourself, but it's still a stagnation.
Sure. But that's just a bump in the road. Really, I mean.
But I'm saying for me, it's a yin yang game. Like there's a positive. You're making positive mental steps. You're still making negative physical steps because you're still catching yourself in the same bad habit. Sure. Although you're like, oh, okay, it's not so much so now. Like I'm not doing it so much now. You're still making positive steps. It's still a drag.
And I agree. All I'm saying is the fact that you've begun to catch yourself in those moments. I noticed when I first started to really try to change the way I reacted to situations. I tried to quell my hot temper. That's what I've been trying to do for a long, long time.
Yeah.
I noticed that there was a moment of neutrality where if I got mad at something and I would go, ah. And if I could catch myself in that first breath and not yell anything, I caught myself and I could just.
We had the same habit, dude. We had this.
But if you think about it, the moment of neutrality was an immeasurably short amount of time.
Yeah.
Because.
But you're catching it.
This breathing
in
to yell some awful thing at whatever tool just, screwed up, even though I'm the one that did it, to yell something at something, right? Like I'm winding up to lose my temper. And in the moment I catch myself, I've already started forward. My negative progress has ceased and I'm moving forward. So I don't disagree that there's a moment of neutrality. I think there definitely is, but I think that it's such a short window of time. And I think if we are, okay, so if you've ever seen a train stopped on the tracks, he's a neutral, right? Let's say a train's backing up on the tracks. There's a whole mechanical process that has to take place to stop the train and then get it moving forward. And it can take quite a while to do that. But when we're talking about thought processes, which is really what the meaning crisis is if you have no meaning in your life, all of your thoughts will be negative all the time. And if you can find meaning in your life, it's not going to be that hard to start thinking positively. And a thought process is all we have to change the rest of our lives completely. Well, the changing of a thought process is that fast.
For some, I think for some it's the train.
To go from having a negative thought about yourself all the time and making a decision to start thinking more respectful and more loving thoughts about yourself, even if you don't feel them.
Yeah.
That immediately we've begun forward
Psychologically
progress.
You can. Physiologically it's the train.
You can feel as though now there's bad habits you have to break. That's a long process, right? But you're still making forward progress. The fact that you've changed your mind, the mind has to change before anything else can, really, right? Anybody who's wanted to lose weight or do more push-ups or whatever, you've got to decide that this is the thing we're going to do, or you're going to quit on day 3, right? But once you've made up your mind, once I'd made up my mind to keep my temper, it didn't matter how many times I lost it after that. If I was catching myself a little better every time, because it won't all of a sudden change. No. And that's, I think, what you're hinting at when you say that it's the long, slow process of trying to get.
I understand what you're saying with that psychological switch. You have that positive motivation right there. Yeah. If you can keep your switch on. For most people, if you can keep your switch on, I think maybe what we're getting tied up on is that metaphor of the train, like the physiological effects of that psychological switch. You're not necessarily going to see that change right away because you're going to still do that stupid bad habit you've been doing for the past 10 years. But it's that catching that bad habit where it's like, oh, I just did something stupid. That's your positive check. Yeah.
But I wouldn't call that neutrality. I wouldn't call that stagnation.
Okay.
Because it's forward progress. As soon as you decide to make forward progress and you start trying,
I can respect that.
Yeah, everything else is forward.
For sure.
Because now when you get into and out of those situations that, let's say you lose your temper, right? You get into and out of the situations where you lose your temper, you have new knowledge you didn't have before or I didn't have before 15, 20 years ago, when I would lose my temper like an animal and then behave like an animal and then learn lessons like an animal. I was making no forward progress whatsoever. I was being a complete dum-dum, and it hurt me. It hurt people around me. As soon as I started to try to keep my temper, I was making forward progress that I'd never made before. And I'm not a whole lot better now. In some situations, I'm not a whole lot better. I'd love to be able to tell you, oh yeah, I've completely solved my hot temper problem. I have absolutely not. But the fact is when I'm getting into it, I'm like, and now I have the cognizance at least. I've at least made the forward progress to tell my loved ones to go away. Because it might get ugly out here. Don't be in the shop for the next 10 minutes, Like, I need to throw a wrench. It's not very mature, but it's at least far enough down that track to know that, okay, Just be by yourself when you're doing this. Figure it out, because you don't want to say things that hurt other people. And the best way to do that is to be by yourself. If you feel it and you feel you're losing control of your temper, the best thing to do is either vacate, or if you can't, just tell everybody else
And I think
to vacate.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to point out for anyone that hung on this long, one thing that I've noticed, at least with myself, and I would be so bold to say for you as well. I think writing has helped with the meaning crisis for me. Just being able to jot down my own critics, my own critiques for one, and my own thoughts, and then being able to go back and see the habits that I have created 2-3 years ago, and still see if, am I still doing this? Am I still on track with this positive change I've made? Am I still doing this negative thing that I pointed out? Am I still following this goal that I wrote out like 5 years ago?
Right.
Are we on track for this goal, and how many milestones have we met? Those little notes that you make in your notebook, your journal, or whatever, can keep you on a pathway for your life for years, man, for years.
Absolutely.
And you can look back and kind of see your own progress and see your map laid out so that you know your next step, because you can plot out your own habits. And I mean, and it depends on how detailed you get, but I mean, you could track your own financial record as a self-employer. Obviously, you can track your own financial records, and you can see your own, like, you could even go in to see like what my mood was for the year and my financial report, and be like, was I depressed? Oh, I didn't make a lot of money when I was depressed.
Absolutely. The best way to learn, I think the best way to learn about yourself is to write.
Yeah.
The second best way to learn about yourself, in my experience anyway, is read back on your journals. I've got journals now. I've got journals that date back 9.5 years, almost 10 years now. And I can read back on those journals and say, wow, that was something I actually fixed in my life. That was something I actually got past, and I don't struggle with that anymore. Or, ooh, I'm still doing that,
Yeah.
Because then it's lessons you can learn from past you. Yeah, but the only way you'll remember these things, the only way anybody will remember most of the stuff that I've learned from myself from 9 years ago, is to write it down.
Yeah.
Half of these experiences only come back to me once I'm reading them. They would have been lost to the subconscious mind long ago if it weren't for the fact that they were written down.
Yeah, I find myself doing that a lot too. Like I'll have like a half page that I wrote, and I'm a philosophical guy. For anyone that doesn't know, obviously,
I do.
You know,
we do.
We know. So like my meaning crisis is really come down to philosophical points and how to articulate my beliefs, because words for me are my map, because meaning comes from the words that I use a lot. And I extract the meaning in the way I articulate philosophical points. So I'll go back and I'll read stuff on faith. And there was a point in my life where I was very atheistic and bitter at ideology in general. And I'd heard once upon a time that meaning crisis really comes from like a lack of faith. And it really hit me in the heart. Like I was like, no, like I don't need faith to live or exist or be happy or anything. But then the more I'd go back and I'd read my own crap and talking shit on faith. And now after 5 years of that outlook on faith, and I've changed that viewpoint. I've written other things on faith now, and to go back and read 5 years ago versus like 3 months ago, complete night and day change. It's like, well, you can't really exist without faith, because you can't wake up tomorrow and take your next step out of bed without believing that you're going to survive. And that's faith. That is faith in its most micro.
Ironically, Stephen, even making the statement that I don't need faith to survive,
that's faith.
Is faith in the statement. You have a certain faith that the statement is true.
Yeah, that's I was in that too. I was finding my own dragon eating its tail.
Right.
And that's where I was like, I'm just beating myself with my own logic. But yeah, it was that moment of like finding faith. For me, was kind of a meaningful moment too, where it was okay. Like I have to have faith in my own process before I'll ever even have gratitude, self-respect, self-worth. I have to have faith in myself first to take that positive change, that positive step.
Every decision you make is based on faith in something
Somewhere.
It's easiest to see in certain things like investing in the markets and doing stuff like that, is people who buy, say, bonds, want to have something that's almost, they're not completely safe, but it's almost a guaranteed return, at least to some degree. But they're willing to give up a lot of money to do that they could make elsewhere.
Yeah.
But they have no faith that will work. But they have faith in the bond. Well, that's a metaphor that can be taken to all kinds of all parts of life, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, we got tied up a little bit. I don't even know if I'd call it something so severe as being tied up, but I think what you and I did earlier is we were talking about two different aspects and two different steps of this process. I think what I started talking about when I was talking about pretending like you love yourself and pretend like you respect yourself, if you can't muster any more than that, you just pretend that you love yourself and pretend that you respect yourself. I think what I started doing is talking about the very first steps that you have to take to find any kind of meaning at all.
That's your stagnant moment. That's your pretend moment, your stagnant moment.
Right.
I think
but that's also the exact moment that everything goes into gear.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. But,
you know?
Yeah.
And you're speaking on a more, what do I want to say, advanced stage. I think is what
I think of things like very scaled. I am a spectrums kind of thinker. So everything for me is scaled. So for me, like when I break something down, it's step by step. And before you can go forward, if you're going backwards, before you can go forward, you have to stop. In my head, like there's always like I'm changing gears, I'm pushing the brake, then I can go forward. In that moment, that's for me, that's where I'm catching myself. I'm like, it's that microsecond of like, okay.
Yeah.
And then that moment where you're like, oh, the switch. I'm always like you got the switch, I got the middle, I got the travel time in the switch. You know, like
yeah.
That's how I think. So I think we're on the same page as far as that goes.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I like that. I like that metaphor of the locomotion, where it's like you're going backwards, and you still got a lot of momentum. Just because you put it in gear and your metal tires are slipping on your metal rails, you're still trying to go forward.
You bet.
Yeah.
And you know, okay, so if you've ever been in a fast car with a manual transmission and you're backing up, say there's the police,
you can always slam it,
and you don't want to see them into reverse and then come out, and you put it in gear while you're still going backwards. You finagle it into gear and hit the gas. You stop for a moment, but it's a real short moment. That's the thought process. The fast car is the thought process. Yeah. Habits of the locomotive. Yeah. It takes a long, long time to change a habit in a lot of cases. Some dudes can quit doing, you know, some compulsive gamblers can walk away cold turkey. Some smokers can walk away cold turkey, and never, ever pick it up again. And then some people, it's this long, slow, a long, slow process where they just can't seem to kick it. And for whatever reason, people have their reasons. But the point is like those habits for most people are a long, slow process. Junk food for me is something that's insanely difficult to stay away from, but it's also the thing that will make me lose self-respect once I realize I've stuffed my face with a bunch of garbage. I'm like, oh, you're nasty, And so it's one of those things that I actually do want to stop doing is ever eating junk food ever. But see, that's unrealistic because I know I won't. Like I just know I won't. Yep. So, okay, what can we do? Well, what everyone should strive to do and what anyone really can do is temper it, right? There's nothing that says we can't eat junk food once in a great while. That doesn't kill you. Well, it's if you stuff your face with it all the time, that's when you start going to having health problems and getting fat and then eventually just being dead from some disease. Well, I don't want that. And I want to take better care of myself than that. But I know I enjoy junk food. Well, like any other thing that we enjoy, just don't let it be all the time. Well, that's a great way to start breaking any habit. is, okay, there's going to be times I'm going to slip up. When I was quitting smoking, there was moments where I was quitting and I really was trying to quit that time. And I'd find myself in a group of smokers. And then before you know it, somebody hands me a cigarette and without thinking about it, I'm halfway done with it.
Yep.
Oh man, I was in a wrong crowd. Right.
Yeah.
And if I want to start loving myself and respecting myself and therefore finding at least the first building blocks to meaning, then I got to start hanging out with people who have meaning, who I see them and like their life has meaning. They feel that their life has meaning. They love themselves. They respect themselves. It shows in the way they talk about themselves, shows in the way they treat others, right? A person who doesn't respect themselves, but they treat others with decency and with love, really what they become is a doormat because they have no respect for themselves. They're the person that everybody walks on. But if you respect yourself, you could do that and still hold your boundaries. I want to find that person. Like anything, honestly, I think anything in life we need a mentor for.
Yeah,
and I think the fastest, how do I want to say, the faster we can find a mentor for something, the faster we're going to get good at it. And so it doesn't have to be some official mentorship program. It doesn't have to, will you please be my mentor? Will you go steady with me as my mentor? Like, it doesn't have to be anything like that, right? It's just finding those people that you see, they treat themselves with respect and you can tell that they love themselves and others. And that's the person you just go stand next to.
And they have
them.
a certain drive and an inspiration about them.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And go,
They're
if it's nothing more, go stand next to them. If they treat other people with respect and with kindness and you don't do anything like overly weird, you just stand next to them, like just go be close to those kinds of people. I know if somebody did that, I'd ask him, what are you doing? And if he told me this is why, well, you seem like you love yourself and I kind of want to learn how to do that. There's absolutely no way I could say no to that.
To go to a military structure and be around guys that are driven and they can have a good time. It's that work hard, play harder kind of mentality, but to just be around people that knew how to play hard and then get their ass to work and structure themselves.
Yeah.
It's a whole new ball game of just not knowing what to do at all. Or I've got this belief that words create reality.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think that articulating certain things really brings meaning and value in the way that you use your words. When you start using certain words like self-respect, not very many people use the word self-respect.
Mm-mm.
And that would show in the way that they respect themselves. You don't even articulate the word self-respect within your conversation. Mm-hmm. You're not going to have self-respect at all.
Mm-hmm. And it's a phrase that's so infrequently used that most people don't understand how little they respect themselves.
Yeah. And that is meaning. I mean, I don't know how else to put that other than like that, just having the word self-respect in your conversation brings up so much more meaning in your conversation. Mm-hmm. It takes nothing to say positive words,
right?
To trade them out, to take a negative situation and to paint your silver lining around it and use different words, completely different picture.
Yep, it is. It absolutely is.
Yeah, and
it's the changing of the mind.
And the words create reality. Mm-hmm. Words change the person, the physiological person at that point after a certain period of time, your locomotion.
Yeah.
Right. So it's that first thought of like, I got to catch myself. It's your psychological switch.
Yep.
Now I got to start speaking it forward. That's a habit. Okay. That's your locomotion. And that's your words starting to create that physiological change, that momentum.
It's true. And I was going to say analogy. It's not analogous at all. It's actually what happens when I lose my temper. It shows a lack of self-respect. Shows a lack of self-love. Mm-hmm. Right? Because I'm not speaking to myself kindly in that moment. It's Kunz, you moron. So a lot of people do that, but I don't think everybody loses their temper the same as me. Few people probably. But they're doing the same things to themselves. They just don't know that. I've known self-punishers that don't know that they're a self-punisher. So anytime they get anywhere close to success, they submarine themselves on purpose, but subconsciously on purpose. Right. So it's not something they're consciously, hey, this is going pretty well. I think I'm going to screw it up. Like that's how most people don't say that to themselves, right?
Yeah. Well, that's those people that
maybe
say
the most
they crack
sadistic
under pressure.
person. Like
that's the exact people that say they crack under pressure all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, I crack under pressure. It's like, no, you just fail.
Right.
Let's just say that.
Right.
You're just failing.
Be honest
Succeed.
about it.
Try
Be honest
succeeding.
about it. You don't respect yourself enough to endure.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of times that's what it is. That's what it was for me.
Mhm.
You know, until I learned to at least start pretending to respect and love myself. And then a lot of that started to go away. A lot of that, how do I want to say?
The self-confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I got a great deal of that once I started to respect and love myself, because I actually started to become a person that I loved.
Mhm.
But taking responsibility for my failures was a lot easier once I started to respect myself.
Yeah. Well,
Because I realized I had respect for myself. And so what does a person who respects himself want?
Yeah.
Well, they want respect from others now. Well, by taking responsibility for your actions, you're going to get that. And if I saw that all I had to do was be a little bit embarrassed over the fact that I effed this up, but I was going to earn the respect of others through that, well, I respected myself now and I wanted respect.
Mhm.
So now I'm going to own up to it.
Well, yeah, that's a good point that you put up too. Like once you are able to admit that you screwed it up in front of other people, even there's a lot of people that can't. They don't have that I'd say it's self-pride, but it's. I don't know how would you articulate that. It's that they don't have a certain level of self-pride that they will allow themselves to critique themselves in front of other people and admit they're wrong.
It's an insecurity problem.
Yeah.
It's a real insecurity problem.
How else? I don't know how else to
Not
say
being
it.
able to admit your mistakes is just it. To me, it's, well, admitting your mistakes is the most difficult thing to do. To admit you're wrong, but I think it's an insecurity problem.
Yeah, and I don't think that there's a certain attraction to someone that can just admit that they're wrong too.
Yeah.
You know. Well, it's like earlier. Well, when you were saying something about. I'm not gonna say I'm attractive because of this, but you're saying something about the locomotion. What we were getting into that little bit of disagreement where I'm like, okay, I can respect that. Like you've made your point.
Mm-hmm.
I respect that moment.
Yeah.
And there's a certain point of attraction within a relationship where it's like, oh, okay, thank you. Like you admitted.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to concede, even though it's like a little bit of a concession. I don't know how you. Anyway, it was just a little bit within a conversation, but like that just adds such more of an attraction of I want to talk to this person more. Absolutely. You know, and that those little bitty micro moments
mm-hmm.
where someone can just take that humility and be like, okay, I was wrong for that moment.
Absolutely.
You know,
I mean, there's little that's more insufferable than
a
person who always has to be right.
for that shit too. Like you can respect yourself. And, I can admit that I'm wrong in front of someone.
You bet.
So you find those little bits of like building those habits, like
mm-hmm.
you're saying, you build those little habits where you're just kind of layering them on a little bit at a time. Like, oh, okay, I can admit I'm wrong. Now I can show that I'm wrong. I can walk you back and show you that I'm wrong now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can go back 3 days later to my customer and be like, hey, I screwed this up. I'm going to fix it for you.
Yeah.
You know,
which is, first of all, is there anything more insufferable than a person who always has to be right, even if they're super obviously wrong? I mean, I've been that person before. I know I have.
Yeah.
You know?
I know I've definitely been that person before.
But by the same token, I try to never be that guy. I try not to, which I know I don't do it as often because I'm trying not to, right? Like I try to keep focus of the fact that, don't tell anybody, but you're probably wrong, you know? And then it's, and you have that moment. Like that moment's a terrible moment. Like that feeling in the pit of your gut where you know you're wrong and you got to admit it. That's an awful moment to be in. Don't make it last any longer than it has to.